You don't wake up one day and randomly change your life. You don't stumble into a breakthrough by accident. You don't transform because you consumed enough information. Here's the truth. Change does not begin with motivation. It does not begin with a new plan. It does not begin with another strategy, another technique, another affirmation, or another attempt to fix yourself. Change begins with a decision about who you are. That sounds simple. It sounds almost too obvious. But this is the part nobody slows down long enough to understand. You keep trying to change what you do without first changing what you believe about yourself. And behavior that is not supported by identity always collapses. You can force yourself to act differently for a while. You can wake up early for a week. You can budget for a month. You can be confident for a day. You can repeat powerful words in the mirror. But if underneath all of that effort you still believe you are the same person you have always been, your nervous system will quietly pull you back to what feels familiar. The real work is invisible. The truth is that your life is not shaped by what you attempt occasionally. It is shaped by what you unconsciously assume is normal for you. Normal income, normal love, normal health, normal confidence, normal struggle. You do not get what you want. You get what feels like you. That is why someone can read the same books you read, watch the same videos you watch, follow the same advice you follow, and produce completely different results. The difference is not knowledge. It is identity. If deep down you see yourself as someone who tries but never quite gets there, then every action you take will be filtered through that lens. You will hesitate where someone else moves. You will doubt where someone else commits. You will interpret neutral events as confirmation that you are still behind. And you will call it reality. But it is not reality. It is reinforcement. The brain is designed to preserve identity more than it is designed to pursue improvement. That means if you attempt something that contradicts who you believe you are, your system will resist it. Not because it is bad, not because it is wrong, but because it feels unfamiliar. This is why effort alone does not create change. You can push, you can strain, you can grind. But if you are operating from the belief that success is hard, that progress is slow, that you are always playing catch-up, then even your progress will feel like struggle. And struggle becomes self-fulfilling. Here's what actually creates change. A subtle internal shift that says, this is who I am now. Not loud, not dramatic, not emotional, just decided. When someone truly changes their life, there is usually a quiet internal moment where they stop negotiating with their old identity. They stop seeing themselves as the person who is learning to be confident and start seeing themselves as someone who speaks with clarity. They stop seeing themselves as someone trying to get in shape and start seeing themselves as someone who takes care of their body. It is subtle, but it is final. From that place, actions are no longer forced. They are consistent. They feel aligned. They feel obvious. If you identify as someone who respects their time, you don't need motivation to stop procrastinating. If you identify as someone who builds wealth, you don't need willpower to avoid reckless decisions. If you identify as someone who communicates honestly, you don't need a script to speak your truth. Identity removes friction. The problem is not that you lack discipline. The problem is that you are trying to build a life that contradicts your current self-image. So instead of asking, what should I do differently? Ask something far more powerful. Who have I been being? Not what have you been doing? Who have you been being? Have you been being someone who expects delay? Someone who expects rejection? Someone who expects effort to equal struggle? Someone who expects growth to be exhausting? Because whatever you expect consistently becomes your experience. This is not mystical. It is neurological. Your brain filters reality based on your dominant assumptions. It highlights what matches your identity and ignores what contradicts it. If you see yourself as overlooked, you will notice every instance that confirms that story. If you see yourself as capable, you will notice opportunities where others see obstacles. The same world, different filter. The hidden truth is that change is less about adding something new and more about subtracting what no longer fits. Old labels, old stories, old excuses, old emotional reactions. You do not need a brand new personality. You need to release the outdated one. And that release begins with awareness. Start observing how you describe yourself internally. Pay attention to the subtle language you use. I'm just not good at this. I've always been this way. I'm not the type of person who... Those sentences are not harmless. They are declarations. They instruct your nervous system how to behave. If you continue declaring limitation, you will continue producing it. So here is something practical. For the next 7 days, catch one limiting identity statement per day. Just one. Write it down. Then rewrite it in a way that reflects who you intend to become. Not a fantasy, not a lie, a direction. I'm bad with money becomes I am learning to manage money wisely. I always quit becomes I follow through on what matters. I'm not confident becomes I speak clearly and calmly. Then act in alignment with that revised identity once per day. Just once. A small behavior that supports it. Identity solidifies through repetition. You don't need a dramatic overhaul. You need consistent reinforcement. Change is not created by intensity. It is created by congruence. When your thoughts, your words, and your actions align around a chosen identity, the results follow naturally. Because you are no longer fighting yourself. You are no longer trying to force outcomes from a conflicted state. You are becoming someone new from the inside out. And that is the truth nobody wants to hear, because it removes the comfort of blaming circumstances. It removes the excuse that you just need better conditions. It puts the focus back where it belongs, on you. Not in a harsh way, in an empowered way. Because if identity created your current results, identity can create different ones. That is where change begins. If you want real change, not temporary momentum, not a spike of motivation that fades in 3 days, then you have to understand something most people never examine closely enough. Your identity is reinforced by repetition, not by insight. You can have a breakthrough moment. You can feel clarity while listening to something powerful. You can nod your head and think, this makes sense. But unless that insight is followed by consistent alignment, your old self-concept will quietly reclaim control. The brain does not change because you understand something intellectually. It changes because you embody something consistently. This is where many people get frustrated. They think, I get it. I understand that I need to see myself differently. So why hasn't anything shifted? Because understanding is not integration. There is a gap between awareness and embodiment, and that gap is closed through deliberate, repeated behavior that confirms your new identity. Every time you act in alignment with who you are becoming, you are sending your nervous system evidence. You are teaching your body what is normal. And once something feels normal, it stops requiring effort. Right now, your current results feel normal to you, even if you say you dislike them. That is why they persist. Your income level, your habits, your relationship dynamics, your internal dialogue, they all sit inside a range that your system recognizes as familiar. When you try to operate outside that range, discomfort appears. Not because you are wrong, not because it is impossible, but because unfamiliarity triggers resistance. The mind prefers predictability over possibility. That resistance often gets mislabeled as a lack of discipline. You tell yourself you need to try harder, be stronger, wake up earlier, push more. But the issue is not effort. The issue is congruent. If you're trying to behave like someone successful while still believing you are, someone who struggles, your actions will feel forced. You will burn energy maintaining behavior that does not match your identity. Eventually, you will default back to what feels like you. The shift begins when you stop trying to act your way into a new life and start seeing yourself as the kind of person who naturally produces different outcomes. That internal repositioning changes everything. It alters your posture. It changes the tone of your voice. It shifts the way you enter a room. It influences how you interpret silence, rejection, feedback, opportunity. Identity filters perception before you even realize it. Consider how differently two people can experience the same event. One sees rejection as proof they are not good enough. The other sees it as redirection. One sees a setback as confirmation that success is out of reach. The other sees it as refinement. The external event is identical. The internal identity creates the meaning, and meaning shapes action. This is why change does not begin with circumstances. It begins with interpretation. And interpretation is rooted in identity. If you see yourself as resilient, you will look for growth inside challenge. If you see yourself as unlucky, you will look for injustice. You are not reacting to reality as it is. You are reacting to the version of reality that aligns with who you believe you are. So here is something practical you can begin doing immediately. Instead of asking, how do I fix this situation? Ask, who would I need to be for this situation to resolve differently? That question moves you from external control to internal authorship. It shifts your focus from manipulating outcomes to embodying qualities. If you want different financial results, who do you need to be? Disciplined, calm, strategic, patient. If you want a healthier relationship, who do you need to be? Direct, secure, compassionate, honest. If you want to build something meaningful, who do you need to be? Focused, consistent, decisive, courageous. Then pick one quality, just one. Do not overwhelm yourself. Choose a single trait and consciously practice it for 7 days. Not perfectly, consistently. If you chose decisiveness, stop overanalyzing small choices. If you chose calmness, slow your breathing before reacting. If you chose discipline, complete one task fully before switching to another. This is not about dramatic transformation. It is about identity rehearsal. Every repetition strengthens a new self-concept. Over time, that self-concept becomes default. And when it becomes default, results shift organically. There is another layer to this that few people talk about, and it is crucial. Your environment reflects your identity back to you. The conversations you tolerate, the standards you accept, the content you consume, the way you structure your time, all of it reinforces who you think you are. If you say you want growth but surround yourself with stagnation, you are feeding the old identity. If you say you want discipline but constantly choose distraction, you're rehearsing inconsistency. Change accelerates when your environment supports your new self-image. This does not mean you need to overhaul your life overnight. It means you make subtle adjustments that align with who you are becoming. Clear your workspace. Organize your finances. Reduce one draining interaction. Replace 1 hour of passive scrolling with learning or building. Each adjustment is a vote for your new identity. Here is something powerful to remember. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your self-concept. If your self-concept remains unchanged, your goals will feel like constant uphill battles. But when your self-concept evolves, your goals become expressions of who you already are. That is what actually creates change, not more effort, not louder motivation, not another strategy layered on top of the old identity. A clear decision about who you are, followed by consistent alignment with that decision. You're not waiting for change to happen. You're deciding whether you are ready to become someone different. And the moment that internal decision becomes stable, everything external begins to reorganize around it. There is a quiet but undeniable moment that happens before every lasting transformation, and it rarely looks dramatic. It is not fireworks. It is not a surge of adrenaline. It is not a declaration shouted from a mountaintop. It is an internal recognition that the way you have been relating to yourself is no longer acceptable. Not in a harsh, self-critical way, in a clear, grounded way. You begin to see that the story you have been repeating is optional. And the moment you see it as optional, you are no longer trapped by it. This is where real change separates itself from temporary inspiration. Inspiration feels good. It lifts you. It gives you vision. But recognition restructures you. When you genuinely understand that your internal narrative has been shaping your external reality, something stabilizes. You stop looking outward for the next breakthrough. You begin auditing the thoughts you allow to pass unquestioned. Listen closely to how you describe yourself in private. Not what you post, not what you tell others. The quiet sentences that run automatically when something goes wrong. I always mess this up. This is just how I am. I'm not built for that. These statements seem small. They feel harmless, but they are declarations. And declarations become boundaries. Your nervous system believes what you repeat. Your subconscious does not evaluate whether a statement is empowering or limiting. It registers consistency. If you consistently identify as someone who struggles, it will filter opportunities accordingly. If you consistently identify as someone who adapts and learns, it will search for confirmation of that identity instead. This is not mystical. It is neurological. The brain looks for patterns that validate existing beliefs. It conserves energy by reinforcing what feels familiar. That means the fastest way to alter your trajectory is not by trying to control every external factor. It is by deliberately upgrading the internal language that defines you. But this is where people get stuck again. They attempt to overlay positive phrases on top of unexamined doubt. They say empowering things while still emotionally anchored to the old narrative. That dissonance creates friction. Instead of jumping to exaggerated declarations, start with credibility. Shift from "I am unstoppable" to "I am capable of learning." Shift from "everything works perfectly" to "I am becoming more consistent." The goal is not fantasy. The goal is internal alignment. Another overlooked factor in change is emotional attachment to identity. Even painful identities can feel safe. If you have been the underestimated one, the overlooked one, the one who struggles, that identity becomes part of your story. It shapes your relationships. It defines your expectations. Letting go of it can feel disorienting, not because growth is bad, but because growth requires releasing familiarity. You must be willing to disappoint the version of you that kept you comfortable. That version is not evil. It protected you. It helped you survive. But survival is not the same as expansion. And there comes a point where maintaining the old self-image becomes more painful than stepping into something larger. Practically, here is how you begin dissolving that attachment. When you notice yourself reverting to a familiar limitation, pause. Not to shame yourself, to observe. Ask, is this reaction aligned with who I am becoming, or who I used to be? That single question creates separation between you and the old pattern. Once there is separation, there is choice. Then act in micro-defiance of the old identity. If you used to avoid confrontation, initiate a calm, direct conversation. If you used to procrastinate, complete one task immediately without negotiating. If you used to shrink your voice, speak up once in a setting where you normally stay quiet. These actions are not about performance. They are about rehearsal. Every small act reinforces a new self-concept. Over time, the discomfort fades. What once felt foreign begins to feel natural. And when it feels natural, it no longer drains energy. That is the turning point. When discipline feels normal, when clarity feels standard, when confidence feels like baseline rather than effort. You also need to understand that change requires emotional regulation. If you are constantly overstimulated, reactive, and scattered, your nervous system cannot stabilize a new identity. Grounded breathing, slowing your responses, reducing unnecessary inputs. These are not soft practices. They are structural supports. A regulated system integrates new beliefs faster. When your body is calm, your perception widens. You stop interpreting every obstacle as a threat. You start seeing options instead of limitations. That subtle shift in perception alters your decisions, and altered decisions compound into different results. Change does not explode into your life. It accumulates quietly. It builds through repeated alignment. It becomes visible when the internal shift has been rehearsed enough times to override the old reflex. If you want something different, you cannot keep referencing who you were as your proof of what is possible. You must start referencing who you are becoming, not in theory, in action, in language, in emotional regulation, in standards. This is not about pretending you are already at the finish line. It is about closing the gap between your current behavior and your desired identity, one deliberate choice at a time. The truth is, transformation is less about acquiring something new and more about discarding what no longer fits. When you remove the outdated assumptions, the outdated emotional patterns, the outdated internal script, what remains is capacity, and capacity naturally creates results. Change is not dramatic. It is disciplined. It is consistent. It is internal first. And when that internal architecture stabilizes, the external world reorganizes around it without force. There is another layer to this that rarely gets addressed, and it may be the most important one of all. You can shift your language. You can take new actions. You can regulate your nervous system. But if you're still emotionally addicted to urgency, you will sabotage your own progress. Urgency feels productive. It feels intense. It feels like you care. But most of the time, urgency is just disguised fear. It is the belief that if something does not happen quickly, it will never happen at all. That belief compresses your thinking. It narrows your perspective. It makes every delay feel like failure. And when you interpret delay as failure, you either panic and overcorrect, or you withdraw and assume defeat. Neither response creates sustainable change. Both are reactions rooted in insecurity and not clarity. Real change unfolds from stability, not panic. When you are grounded, you can hold a vision without needing immediate proof. You can take consistent action without demanding instant reward. You can allow time to do its work. This is where people misunderstand manifestation, discipline, growth, and success. They assume intensity equals effectiveness. But intensity without steadiness burns out. If you want to know what actually creates change, look at what you repeat when no one is watching. Look at the habits that continue when motivation fades. Look at the standards you maintain on ordinary days, not extraordinary ones. That is where trajectory is decided. There is something else you must confront as well. You may be unconsciously waiting for permission, waiting for the right circumstances, waiting for validation, waiting for someone to notice your effort before you fully commit. But permission is rarely given. It is taken internally. The decision that you are ready does not arrive from outside. It solidifies inside you when you stop negotiating with your own potential. And this is uncomfortable, because once you accept that no one is holding you back, you lose the comfort of blame. You lose the convenience of externalizing responsibility. You gain freedom, but you also gain accountability. You can no longer say, when things change, I will change. You begin saying, as I change, things will follow. That shift alone restructures your behavior. Instead of reacting to circumstances, you start initiating from identity. Instead of asking, what should I do next? You begin asking, who am I choosing to be in this situation? That question is far more powerful. It pulls you out of surface strategy and into foundational alignment. Let's make this practical. Pick an area of your life where you feel stuck: career, relationships, health, creativity. Instead of listing what is wrong, list the qualities of the version of you who is thriving in that area: calm, decisive, disciplined, open, clear, consistent. Now ask yourself which of those qualities you are postponing, which one you are treating as something you will adopt later after the breakthrough. That is the quality you begin practicing now. You do not wait to feel confident before you move differently. You move with controlled steadiness and allow confidence to follow. You do not wait to feel worthy before setting standards. You set standards and allow worthiness to recalibrate. Identity is shaped by repetition. You do not need to feel fully transformed to begin acting in alignment. You need to be willing to act before comfort arrives. There will be days when doubt resurfaces. That does not mean you have failed. It means old neural pathways are still active. The key is not to eliminate doubt entirely. It is to reduce how much authority you give it. Doubt can exist without directing you. Fear can appear without steering you. The difference is awareness. When you see the old pattern arise and choose not to merge with it, you weaken it. Another element that creates lasting change is environment. Not just physical space, but informational and relational input. If you continuously expose yourself to voices that reinforce limitation, you will have to fight twice as hard internally. If you surround yourself with perspectives that normalize growth, discipline, and emotional stability, alignment becomes easier. This does not mean cutting everyone off. It means being intentional about what shapes your internal climate. You're not just building habits, you are constructing a self-concept. And self-concept determines ceiling. If deep down you still see yourself as inconsistent, your results will plateau at inconsistency. If you begin to see yourself as someone who adapts, recalibrates, and continues, you will persist through fluctuations without dramatizing them. Here is something that will sharpen your progress. Stop measuring change by emotion alone. Emotional states fluctuate. Energy shifts, motivation rises and falls. Instead, measure by response quality. Are your reactions more measured than before? Are your decisions more intentional? Are your boundaries clearer? These are structural upgrades. They matter more than temporary enthusiasm. Growth is subtle at first. It feels almost invisible. but the compound effect is powerful. When you change how you interpret obstacles, how you speak internally, how you regulate emotionally, how you choose behavior in small moments, your direction alters. And direction is everything. You do not need explosive breakthroughs. You need consistent correction. There is also an internal honesty required here. You cannot claim you want change while protecting the habits that contradict it. You cannot desire discipline while defending procrastination. You cannot seek peace while feeding chaos through constant comparison and overconsumption of noise. Change requires trimming what no longer serves you, not dramatically, deliberately. And when you do this long enough, something stabilizes. You stop chasing change. You become someone who changes by default. Growth becomes your baseline, not your project. That is when results feel less forced. That is when life begins responding differently, because you are responding differently first. The truth is not hidden in complexity. It is hidden in consistency. What you reinforce, you become. What you rehearse, you embody. What you embody, you experience. This is what actually creates change. Not intensity, not desperation, not waiting, identity in motion, alignment in repetition, stability over urgency. And once that foundation is solid, the external world has no choice but to mirror the internal shift. There is one more dimension to this that pulls everything together, and it is something very few people are willing to sit with long enough to understand. Change does not begin when you finally feel ready. It begins when you decide that readiness is no longer a requirement. Most delay in life comes from the illusion that you need to feel more prepared, more certain, more confident before you take full ownership of your direction. But confidence is a byproduct of action taken from alignment, not a prerequisite for it. If you wait until fear disappears, you will wait indefinitely. If you wait until doubt is silent, you will never begin. Emotional resistance is not a stop sign. It is a threshold. The question is not whether resistance shows up. The question is whether you interpret resistance as danger or as growth pressure. That interpretation determines whether you retreat or expand. When you begin treating discomfort as information instead of proof of incapability, everything shifts. Discomfort often signals that you are stepping outside of an old identity. The nervous system reacts because it is unfamiliar territory, not because it is wrong territory. There is a major difference. If you mislabel that reaction as failure, you shrink back into what feels safe. If you recognize it as expansion, you continue forward with steadiness. This is why emotional regulation is such a powerful skill. Not because it makes you calm all the time, but because it keeps you from making permanent decisions based on temporary states. Someone who can feel frustration without abandoning their standards will outpace someone who relies on motivation. Someone who can sit with uncertainty without collapsing into panic will build far more momentum than someone who needs constant reassurance. And here is where the deeper layer of truth reveals itself. Sustainable change is boring at first. It is not dramatic. It does not look impressive from the outside. It often feels like nothing significant is happening. But beneath the surface, patterns are rewiring. You are responding differently. You're thinking differently. You're holding yourself differently. Those subtle recalibrations compound over time in ways that are difficult to measure day to day, but undeniable in hindsight. Consider this carefully. The person you become is shaped less by the big decisions and more by the repeated micro-choices. The decision to pause before reacting. The decision to speak clearly instead of emotionally. The decision to follow through even when no one is watching. These are the quiet votes you cast for the kind of identity you are building. Each vote strengthens the self-concept that will determine your results. There is also a maturity that develops when you stop outsourcing your progress to external validation. Applause is unreliable. Praise is inconsistent. Recognition is delayed. If your effort depends on being seen, your consistency will collapse whenever attention fades. But when your standards are internal, when your discipline is self-respecting rather than approval-seeking, you become unshakable. This does not mean you stop caring about outcomes. It means you stop tying your worth to them. You act with precision and intention because that is who you are becoming, not because you need immediate reward, Paradoxically, when you detach from the urgency of outcome, your performance improves. Anxiety decreases. Focus sharpens. Decisions become cleaner. Now let's speak about alignment in a way that is grounded and practical. Alignment is not mystical. It is behavioral coherence. Your thoughts, words, and actions move in the same direction. When they are fragmented, you feel friction. When they are unified, you feel momentum. Many people think they are blocked. In reality, they are divided. One part of them wants change. Another part fears losing familiarity. Until those parts are integrated, energy is scattered. Integration happens when you consciously bring fear into the conversation without letting it run the meeting. You acknowledge the concern. You validate the discomfort, but you do not surrender authority. You choose direction with awareness rather than avoidance. That is emotional leadership. And when you practice this repeatedly, your identity strengthens. You begin to trust yourself. Not because everything works out instantly, but because you have evidence that you will not abandon yourself when things are unclear. Self-trust is the foundation of resilience. It is built in small promises kept, not grand declarations made. Another overlooked truth is that change accelerates when you simplify. Complexity often hides avoidance. Endless strategies, constant information intake, overanalysis. These can feel productive while keeping you safely stagnant. Clarity emerges when you strip away excess and focus on a few key behaviors that align with who you intend to become. Depth over distraction, precision over noise. This is also where patience becomes powerful. Not passive patience, but committed patience. The understanding that growth is nonlinear. There will be plateaus. There will be setbacks. There will be periods where progress feels invisible. Those phases are not interruptions. They are integration cycles. When you stop dramatizing them, you move through them faster. At some point, you will notice that your internal dialogue has shifted. The self-criticism softens. The urgency reduces. The reactive patterns slow down. You no longer feel like you are fighting yourself. You feel steady, grounded, directed. That steadiness is not accidental. It is the result of repeated internal decisions to respond differently. And this is where the true transformation reveals itself. The external outcomes that once felt distant begin to materialize, not because you forced them, but because you became the version of yourself capable of sustaining them. Success without internal readiness collapses. Success built on aligned identity stabilizes. If you reflect on your own life, you will likely see that every meaningful shift was preceded by an internal recalibration, a change in perspective, a change in expectation, a change in how you related to challenge. Those internal adjustments preceded external results, always. So if you are waiting for proof before you commit fully to growth, reverse that sequence. Commit to growth and allow proof to follow. If you are waiting for certainty before you move, move with grounded intention and allow certainty to build. If you are waiting for confidence before you speak, speak with clarity and let confidence accumulate through repetition. This is not about being fearless. It is about being anchored. Anchored in the decision that your direction matters more than your temporary comfort. Anchored in the understanding that identity shapes outcome. Anchored in the discipline of consistency over intensity. Change is not a lightning strike. It is a series of small, aligned decisions repeated long enough to alter trajectory. And once trajectory shifts, destination changes. That is what actually creates change. Not the dramatic breakthrough, not the overnight transformation, but the internal shift you practice quietly until it becomes your new normal.